That's right. You're listening to another episode of the Co-Main Event Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I'm Chad Dundas. That's Ben Folks. We're both longtime MMA journalists, and for the last 13 years, we've been meeting here every week to break down all the action in the wild, weird, and occasionally wonderful world of mixed martial arts. Ben, I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I think, if anything, the MMA news cycle reminded us over the weekend, perhaps in keeping with the news cycle in the rest of the world, it showed us shit can always get worse. You know, like
Yeah.
I wish that we were sitting here of a Tuesday afternoon talking about how there was a dog shit fight night down there at the Apex in Las Vegas. Steve Garcia went out there and convincingly whooped up on David Onama and beat him in the first round and got his 7th win in a row, and nobody gives a shit, and now he's going to fight Josh Emmett or something. I wish that we were having that conversation, but we're not. We're not having that conversation. We're going to sit here, at least during the beginning of this show, and talk about fight fixing of all goddamn things.
Yeah.
Can always get worse, brother. It can always get worse.
And see, I can hear it in your voice now that you mentioned it. You're longing for just the normal days of the just some fights era, the oversaturation era, the lull between big time events that actually matter. And instead, we have to address the question of, is this sport fucking crooked?
Mhm.
Is the shit fixed? Especially because, we've done this before. We've had this whole conversation before where guy goes out there right before the fight, the betting lines do something weird. Everybody goes, "Oh, what's that about?" Then he goes out there, puts on a poor performance. Afterwards, everybody's like, "We think that shit was fixed." And then it just kind of gets quietly swept under the rug with relatively minimal consequences. We were at one point promised federal fucking prison for the
Yeah.
people who were involved in that Derek Minner situation, people who allegedly it included James Krause. And then here we are, 3 years later, and seems like everybody kind of involved has been content to forget about it. I think, honestly, as far as we know, the person who got the toughest consequences from that was Jeff Molina, who was a teammate who was found to have bet on the fight and got like a 3-year suspension from the Nevada State Athletic Commission. That's kind of crazy that the guy who ends up with the harshest penalty is just a dude who didn't really orchestrate this thing but was trying to financially profit from it. Then here we go, and we end up in another situation where Isaac Dulgarian comes in, starts out as around like a minus 250 or so favorite for most of the pre-fight betting stage. And then right before the fight takes place, he drops to like a minus 150, indicating some people have gone and thrown some money down on his opponent here. And maybe a lot of money, maybe on specific props. That's kind of what helped make them easy to spot in the Derek Minner situation, as a lot of people were throwing down under 2.5 rounds, first round TKO kind of bets. It's exactly what happened. Here he goes out there, doesn't exactly put on a breakneck effort. Doesn't look like he is fighting for his life out there. Has kind of a lackluster takedown attempt, gets caught, gives up his back, gets caught in a rear naked choke that he doesn't do a great job defending, and then ends up tapping out in the first round. And since then, sports books have been like, hey, if you lost money on this one, we're going to refund your bet. Which that was the first sign, really, that something was up. Because when you ever hear about these sportsbook people, Chad, giving money back,
Yeah. Oh, it's never happened to me.
I mean, I wish might be the most positive thing that has happened in our $20 you never want to see again segment to me in a long time. Usually they are pretty unmerciful about the interpretation of the rules in some of these bets. Here, they announce preemptively, hey, if you had a losing bet on this one, we're going to refund it. Now, the UFC has cut Dulgarian. That happened sort of right away, the next day. Then The Nevada State Athletic Commission announces it's going to withhold his purse, which also pretty big consequence there. You know what to me is interesting? We haven't heard shit from him as of the time of this recording. It's been 3 days since then. All this stuff has come out. People are basically out there saying, we think you threw this fight, that you're not getting paid for it, you lost your job over it. You look on his socials, the Instagrams and the Twitters, he was pretty active leading up to the fight. Nothing since the fight. And I heard from a couple fighters yesterday, just sending me texts asking me what I knew about this situation. They are interested in it. And at least one of them was like, if I had not thrown a fight, and people were out there accusing me of throwing a fight, to the point where he kind of is looking like he's on his way to Shoeless Joe Jackson territory. He's kind of looking like he might be blackballed. And he was like, hey, if I had not done this and everybody was saying I had done this, I would be motherfucking you all up and down. I would be very strongly proclaiming my innocence. And instead, nothing, which kind of makes you think that there's some fire underneath all that smoke.
You're saying that his silence speaks volumes.
His silence speaks volumes, you might even say, Chad.
Maybe he's asserting his right not to incriminate himself. Maybe he is...
another thing you do when you're guilty. Yeah. maybe he's doing like a social media cleanse where he's like, he was just like, hey.
Maybe he doesn't even know about this. Maybe he's at an ashram somewhere just
he's
meditating.
Doing like that one of those things like Aaron Rodgers does where you're just like in a dark room for 4 days or something, like doing some Yuri Prohaska shit. And he's like, hey, I was stressed out after the fight. I thought maybe I was doing too much social media and maybe that hurt my chances.
Yeah.
Took a few days off. Anywho, you come back to find out that in your absence, you've been Shoeless Joe Jackson right out of MMA, right out of the UFC.
Here's the thing. We have been talking about this shit for years as a potential risk to the UFC and a potential risk to, I guess, the public perception of MMA in general. In that, if you are a prelim fighter or an undercard fighter, chances are you're not getting paid very much money. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to pretend like getting paid more money is a magic bullet that's going to solve all these problems, because we just recently saw allegations made against NBA players and coaches, all of whom get paid way more than these undercard UFC fighters. And some of those guys are now accused of getting involved in shady betting situations of one kind or another. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you, you pay these guys more, you're going to weed out corruption from the sport. But they sure make easy targets, man. Yeah. It sure seems like they make easy targets. We've seen now in the wake of this, several fighters have come out publicly and basically been like, oh yeah, I've been offered the opportunity to throw a fight. Like, I think Vince Morales came out and said it. Landon Venata came out and said it.
Lando later clarified that he was joking it's not a bad joke when you look at it, because he was saying something where however many UFC losses he had, I don't know if he was like 8-7 or something. He was like, I was approached on 7 different occasions.
Okay.
So it's not a bad joke. It maybe wasn't worded, or maybe it's not the right time to maybe it's a joke. I don't know. But
too soon. Read the room, Lando. Although that is actually a funny joke. But it's just like, man, you're leaving the door open, really, for this kind of corruption. We don't need to get into a big conversation about fighter pay and the UFC having the money, because we all know that they do. But at the same time, it's like, man, you can roll in, if you are an evildoer, you can roll in for a relatively bargain basement price, probably, and say, hey, man, we'll give you X amount of dollars if you throw this fight. And you got to assume that there's people out there doing it and getting away with it. It's just when you get into these situations where you make it too obvious that this is what's happening with the bets, that you're going to end up getting caught. And so I don't know, man. It's like I said, it's not good news. It's not a good day for us to talk about this shit. And it seems like you're kind of courting trouble when you work in the economic realities of this sport.
Yeah, well, and it's not just the economic realities. There are several ways where the UFC is uniquely vulnerable to something like this. We had this conversation back during the Derek Minner thing. Is I remember I was working in the sports gambling industry at the time, and I wrote a story about it for one of my employers there. And I talked to the guy who at the time was the president of US Integrity, which monitors all these sports books. Now they've changed their name, something like IC 360 or something, which very different than we had integrity right in the name before.
Yeah, it sounds cooler now.
He was saying basically, we've known that this is an issue with the UFC for some time, and we have talked to the UFC about it, and we don't think they've done enough about it. Because he was saying, structurally they are at some disadvantages because the NFL, exactly who's on every NFL team, every NFL practice squad. You know who the employees are of each team. You got them all under one roof in your facilities on a daily basis during the season. It's a lot easier to keep tabs on those people and to know where the edge of like the circle of influence ends as far as like who counts as an insider and not. It's a lot tougher in MMA, especially UFC. A lot of these guys, not only you have guys spread out all over the world, literally, but a lot of these guys, the UFC doesn't see them at all except for when they show up on fight week. Monday or Tuesday of fight week, they fly in, and that's when the UFC sees you. And by Sunday, you're gone again, and they don't know what you're up to or who you're up to it with outside of those times. And so that right there creates one potential inroad there. The fighter pay is definitely part of it, especially if you're somebody where if you're looking around and being like, well, I'm not really getting anywhere here, and I can read the odds and know I'll probably be out of here in a year or two. Probably they're not exactly looking at me for a title shot. Maybe I should try to cash in one big time here. Plus, we know these guys a lot of times they end up going into debt for the training camp. Maybe your fight gets canceled. Maybe you're looking at it as here's my only way to not fall into debt doing this sport. Like there are a lot of those kind of pressures that exist in there too. The thing is, we've gotten to a point with it now where we need to expect more from the UFC on it, because clearly just saying like, hey, they're going to go to federal fucking prison, and then they don't. And, some guys get suspended from the athletic commission, but even then it's not exactly, a lifetime ban kind of situation. So some of those guys might reasonably be thinking it's worth the risks. It's way easier to get caught now because of the nature of the online sports books and everything. But the flip side of that is that it's also way easier for the UFC to get a heads up in advance. Hey, something weird is going on. And this happened with the Derek Minner fight, and I reported it at the time. The guy was saying, we saw this line movement. We saw what was going on in the hours before the fight. We sent out alerts to all of our sports books we work with, and he said we got double-digit response numbers, meaning 10 or more different sports books replied to us and said, we're seeing same or similar stuff going on here. And that right there, that system makes it so that you can know this stuff in advance. You don't have to always be in reactive mode. You can hear in advance, hey, there's some suspicions about this fight that you're about to put on. So why still put it on? Especially a fight like this. We're not talking about a heavyweight title fight. We're talking about, a couple featherweights on the undercard of one of the most forgettable fight night events of the year. One that people, a lot of fans probably didn't even know was happening. You could have pulled that fight and lost nothing. And if it ends up that it was all for nothing, maybe you make your apologies, you pay people their show money, whatever, and you move on. But there's got to be an expectation now that the UFC does a little more, because this is harmful to the brand, man. People start to think that your fights aren't on the level. Also, you're out here like every other sports organization. You're in bed with a sports book, online sports book. You're running the ads. You got the odds plastered all over the broadcast. You're updating us on the odds of between the rounds. So it's in your best interest in a lot of different ways to tackle this shit, and not to just kind of sit back and be like, what are you going to do? The UFC, you would think, would want to make sure you don't have any more of these headlines, because right now it seems like their reaction to this one, their reaction to the Derek Minner one before, remember first Dana White came out and was like, I don't think anything happened. There's absolutely zero proof, he said, that anybody here did anything wrong. And then like a week or two later, when we started to hear from different people some of the proof, then he went, they're going to federal fucking prison. And then they didn't, and then we never heard anything else about it. If you just keep playing that same game where you're just hoping everybody will forget and move on until the next time, and especially when you have these fighters coming forward and being like, yeah, I've been approached. Now you got everybody looking at you like, are these fights on the fucking level? Do you want that to be the case? Somebody goes out there and has a poor performance. Somebody goes out there and, you know, there's a questionable stoppage, something like that, that we're all going to be sitting here every single time being like, was this another fix? Like, no, you don't want that. You need to be seen as being like very proactive about stopping it. And right now, I haven't heard shit from the UFC. They put out a statement basically being like, you know, look into, but it's like, and Dana White usually never shy to tell you what he thinks. Where's he been at on this shit, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there is kind of a lot to unpack about that, though, since, as you mentioned, like sports at large could not put their arms around gambling and pull it in tight for a loving kiss more than they have, right? Like sports gambling seems like the greatest thing to happen to sports since the invention of the inflatable ball. Maybe, I don't know. But it's, you know, in recent years with the legalization of sports gambling in almost everywhere and the online component to it, all of sports have embraced plastering gambling all over their broadcasts. They have gambling partnerships. They have, you know, some broadcasts will have some guy who works for the fight promotion sitting there telling you to make all these bets, and then the bets all lose.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've seen that happen before. And the UFC in particular, when you're putting out a dog shit product like this fight night, who's watching it besides degenerates, man? Like, it would seem to me like gambling has become a really important and intrinsic part of your product if you're the UFC. And I also wonder if, like every other factor in this sport, they just think that they're above it at this point, right? Like they might think that the brand is Teflon at this point. And so maybe they don't feel like there is a reason to address it or a reason to do anything differently than what they're already doing. But I think you're right that the thing that hurts the UFC most of all are all of these other fighters coming out and feeling empowered on social media to basically be like, yeah, I've been offered the chance to throw fights. I would never do it because I'm built different.
Yeah.
But like I've been offered that opportunity. It doesn't help to have, you know, Ariel come out and say he's heard from multiple people that they've been offered the opportunity to throw fights. That to me is way more damaging than just the Isaac Dilgarian situation. But I don't know, if I had to guess, I would say the UFC probably considers themselves to be untouchable at this point by almost anything. And they're probably right.
I mean, I do think like this one seems like it has reached out of the MMA bubble a little bit. I've seen it in more mainstream news headlines. I tell you what, Yahoo Sports puts out a daily newsletter, just what's going on in the sports world. And as you can imagine, usually we're talking NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, that kind of stuff. I don't think I've ever been in the Yahoo Sports newsletter for. I subscribe to it. I get the email every morning. I don't think any of my writing has ever been linked or mentioned in the Yahoo Sports newsletter until today. Until it was one of the things they led with on the sports. Like, if you look in the subject line of the thing, it's like UFC betting scandal. This is the kind of thing, especially if you're the UFC. I know we're not in the growth phase anymore, but if you were still trying to make your case to people, I think people are already willing or somewhat ready, if they don't know anything, to assume that this shit is fixed. You're owned by the same company that owns pro wrestling. They kind of look at them and be like, well, that's cage fighting, but that's not a serious sport. Then they hear that some of your fights might be fixed. And a lot of people are probably going like, yeah, that's what I assumed was going on over there anyway. Plus, the sports books, they don't want to be in that kind of business because they're the ones losing money, for one thing, when somebody is going in there with insider knowledge or whether it's they know about an injury or whatever. They're cashing in, taking the sports books money, but also the sports books are like, the worst thing that could happen to us is people lose faith in the integrity of these sports they are betting on. If they don't believe, it's the reason they're not betting on Harlem Globetrotters games. They need to think that this shit is on the level. They need to think that they could sit here and figure it out and outsmart us. And if they think it's fixed, they're not going to do that. They're not going to bet on these sports. We saw after this Derek Minner thing, in some places, UFC fights, the odds just got taken down. Like in Toronto and Ontario, places like that, like they were just like, nope, we're not letting anybody bet on UFC until we're confident that this shit is on the level. Like, it's bad look for everybody involved. And so I think whether the UFC thinks that, hey, nothing stops this money machine or not, like, it's worth it to put at least a little bit of effort into trying to stop this shit, trying to at least look like you got a handle on it. The other part of it, though, I was talking with some of the guys at Uncrown, and we were saying, like, hey, this comes in the wake of the FBI holding a press conference to announce how they caught some NBA dudes, right? Like, they waited until the first week of the season to do it. Like, they were clearly, hey, we got you, NBA. Now you have it happening with the UFC, which very friendly to this presidential administration. The head of the FBI has been cage side at UFC events. They put him on the screen, treat him like a hero, all that kind of stuff, which makes you wonder if it's going to get treated differently that way. As one of my colleagues was saying, it doesn't mean the same thing to be investigated by the FBI in 2025 that it meant even in like 2022. Because now you got to think about the political ramifications. Are we going to take it easier on the UFC? Do they not worry about it because they can always make a phone call, make any of this shit go away? That's another part of it. Because it seems like, I don't know if it's a sign that people just don't take this sport as seriously, if they can look at a potentially fixed fight and be like, whatever, on to the next one. Because shit, man, if you're somebody who likes to bet on these fights, if you're somebody where like that's part of the appeal for you and everything, how do you feel going into the next one? The other people know this shit that you don't know. You don't know which of these fights might. Okay, how do you put your money down on this when you already got all these other variables to consider? Somebody might always poke somebody in the goddamn eye and the whole thing's off. Now you got this thing where you're going like, hey, am I the unwitting rube who's being taken here?
What doesn't help if you're trying to throw a fight is to have Daniel Cormier on the call telling everybody what a shitty job you're doing defending the choke. Just have Daniel Cormier the whole time being like, this is day one stuff, Mike. He should be fighting the hands. He should be holding the wrists. Everybody knows that. What's he punching for? He's doing a bad job. That doesn't help, I don't think.
Well, and also Michael Chiesa got on there afterwards and was like, this was an F- performance. It was a terrible effort. I don't know. You look like you're an amateur. You look like you don't belong in there with these guys. And just pointing out, like, it looks, kind of saying stuff like, it looks like he's not even trying, which you're right. That also does not necessarily help.
Remember, you're listening to the Co-Main Event podcast proper. This show drops every Tuesday afternoon for free in your timelines and your podcast libraries. But if you want even more of the Co-Main Event, you can find Ben Folks and myself all week over on Patreon. Hit us up at patreon.com/co-main event and get loads of extra audio and video content, as well as access to our official Discord message board where they're talking fights and a lot of other stuff literally all the time. Everybody knows by now we are a completely independent podcast. We don't have the backing of a big parent company or even one of the major MMA websites. We're just two guys talking into microphones, and we've been doing it for over a decade. The truth is, though, we can only keep making the show with your support. So if you can spare a few dollars in exchange for a little bit more of your attention, please consider joining the Patreon. I can tell you, Ben, if people subscribe to the Patreon, one thing that they will quickly and conclusively learn is that you and I are not in on the fix. We do not have any inside information about the bets that we are placing. We don't even have any outside information some of the time. And people can be 100% assured of the integrity of our bets because we lose most of them.
Well, speak for yourself. Because, we'll end up discussing this fight a little later, but I benefited from a little bit of weirdness when Waldo Cortez Acosta managed to get himself a W after first seemingly getting himself an L. Made my nut right there, Chad. Just in that one fight, made my nut.
Oh, well, we're going to send 15% of that to Mark Smith, I guess. Another way you could support the show is by going to co-mainevent.com and checking out our merchandise shop. We got t-shirts, we got hats, we got hoodies, we got lots more. Stop by and pick up our best-selling Daddest Man on the Planet coffee mug or t-shirt. While we can keep them in stock, you could also get yourself a Dundasso t-shirt, a Bobby Nux t-shirt, a Volcomania t-shirt. We got it all. Just go to our website, co-mainevent.com, and click the link at the top of the page that says shop. As always, we partner with our friend Johnny Ashcroft on the shop. He's a graphic designer from Portland, Oregon. We can't recommend him highly enough for all your design needs. Hit him up at studiosuperconductor.com or on Instagram at studiosuperconductor. And right about now, like we always do about this time, we're going to do a little bit of listener mail.
Listener mail.
First piece of listener mail comes to us from Isaac Spooner, who writes, apparently Vadim Nemkov and Renan Ferreira are set to fight in the Smart Cage this Saturday, and naturally I just found out. Hell, maybe you're getting this news from me right now. We absolutely are.
Yep, 100%.
Isaac, 100%. Could be a palate cleanser for heavyweight MMA between the Fedor protege and the overlarge homie, and probably the best PFL can do in the absence of Francis Ngannou. Any interest? Stay frosty. Ben Folks, are you interested in a PFL palate cleanser right now, considering that these UFC heavyweights can't maintain their vision these days?
Yeah, well, I mean,
out of both eyes, they just like they don't have use of both their eyes over there in the UFC.
It's, it is kind of hard to know what we're doing when, all right, hey, if you go out there and you win the vacant PFL heavyweight title, I'm just like, okay, I guess good for you. Where do you go from there with that? Because is Big Fran coming back? Is Big Fran gonna fight? I saw your PFL dude on Ariel's show today being like, I'm confident Francis Ngannou fights in the PFL in 2026, and I was like, I am not.
Will he though?
Will he though? I do not think that he will. And so if you don't have that to kind of dangle out there, it almost seems worse for us to know that you on paper have Big Fran, but also can't necessarily get him in the cage, even when you have, a new heavyweight champion. That hurts interest a little bit. It would almost be better if you just didn't have him at all, because then you could just be like, this is the best heavyweight, at least in the PFL. And it's like, you kind of can't even say that if he's sort of out there on walkabout.
And it's only been a little more than a year since Francis had that fight against Renan Ferreira in the PFL. If you had told me that was 5 years ago, I would have believed you. But it's actually just been a little over a year. At the time, you and I were sort of like, why would you have this fight be for the symbolic PFL Super Fights Heavyweight Championship? Why would you not just say this fight is for the PFL Heavyweight Championship? Now we know. I have to sort of retroactively say maybe PFL was right about that one, not to put the heavyweight strap on Big Fran, because you right now you might be in a situation where you'd have to strip him of the title. 39 years old. He's not fighting in the fucking PFL again, man. Next question this week comes from Massimiliano Algieri. Nailed it.
Sounds like a guy.
I'm still trying to understand what happened in that Waldo Cortez Acosta fight, and it seems like the biggest obstacle to that was the commentary team. Ate Delia went and teed off on this man, and Mark Smith stopped it, right? Then he's like, wait, maybe, dude, was I poked? Because apparently we can't have a heavyweight fight without that now. But the commentary team assured me that whether Where's Waldo got poked or not, the fight could not be restarted. The fight was over. They said that a couple times. Then what happens? Fight gets restarted. And almost immediately, Waldo drops Big Tom's friend and TKOs him. So what does the commentary have to say now? Quote from Brendan Fitzgerald, "This sport rules. You just never know." No, motherfucker, you just never know. None of you ever seem to know the rules of this sport you are paid to explain to us as it's happening on fucking TV. Am I crazy? Or does this whole world, or is the whole world around me that's crazy?
That is a good point raised by the manager of AC Milan.
Hmm.
Uh, okay, it is the experience sometimes of watching these fights. It feels like you ever been at a bar watching like the Winter Olympics with just like some randos, and you guys are all sitting there drinking some Miller Lights and watching ski jumping. None of you know shit about fucking ski jumping, but you let somebody watch it for 15 minutes and they think they know everything about it, how the shit is judged, all this, the rules and everything, and they'll be arguing over it, explaining it to each other. One guy watched it yesterday, so he's suddenly an expert on it. Nobody knows shit. Everybody's just spreading their own version of misinformation to one another. That's sometimes what it feels like to be sitting there, because this definitely happened where at first you look at this stoppage and it looks like, okay, Antidelia won. The fight was stopped. He's throwing punches. The referee jumps in there. He goes and celebrates. Looks like he won. And then we're going, wait, no. Maybe he was poked in the eye. And the commentary team did say, they were like, yeah, no, but you can't restart the fight now. Like, they even like were asking each other that, like, you can't restart it, right? And he was just like, no, you can't restart it. And not 2 minutes later, the shit is restarted. And they try to frame it as like, hey, isn't this awesome? Like, no, man, it's fucking confusing as hell is what it is. Because here's one, I gotta feel bad a little bit for Antidelia, even if I did benefit from this one in our betting segment, because he definitely did poke him. The replay, you see he gets his pinky out there, and it's basically the thing that sets off this barrage of punches. And afterwards, he has already celebrated. He's already got that kind of adrenaline dump of, hey, I won. The relief, the joy, all that kind of stuff has already set in. And then they come back to him and be like, no, actually, you didn't. We're going to restart the fight again right now. Get ready. Here we go. And then almost immediately fucking dropped. So that is crazy, man. And like, he's posting some stuff afterwards on social media, and I don't blame him for being upset about that. I mean, you did poke the guy, but it also seems like from his perspective, I'm sure he was just like, you told me I won basically, and then you told me get your fists up, get ready to fight again. Shit. Yeah, that's a lot to try to deal with very suddenly like that. And it does seem like the thing that we've said that makes reffing these fights difficult is that once you jump in there and intervene, you have changed the fight. And it's like, you didn't react to the eye poke right away. The eye poke happened, and then he threw like 4 or 5 punches, and then you jumped in there and stopped it. Like, the whole sequence there was really strange, and it felt like we were at a point where no matter what you did next, somebody was going to feel screwed.
Yeah. Well, the real problem was that Mark Smith should have said time when he stepped in, like, because it looked like he stopped the fight, but I don't actually think that he did. I think that he knew when he stepped in there that there was an eye poke, but he was waving his hand like he was stopping the fight. If he had said time and stepped in there, then it would have been a lot more clear as to what was actually happening. But again, fuck, man, if you're a ref in that situation, sometimes you're just going to make a mistake. Sometimes you're not going to say the right thing in the split second that you have to step in there and stop the fight. And I agree, in this case, it was fair to almost no one, except maybe Waldo Cortez Acosta, who did end up winning the fight moments later. But
and then just screaming, then it's like he remembered all at once that his eye hurt.
Yeah. So it was bad. You know what? You don't want that to happen at the same event where later you're like, some of these fights is fixed, man.
Yeah, you really don't.
Some of these fights where sometimes we just restart them for reasons that the casual viewer probably does not understand, and then the other guy immediately wins. Some of those fights might be fixed, man. You don't want that kind of situation happening.
And it would help if the commentary were not adding confusion.
Yeah.
Like, they're just kind of feeling their way through it as it happens. And just, it's so often that they don't seem to know what's going on, or don't seem to know what the rules say should be going on. And sometimes they'll just be saying the exact wrong thing. And you're like, it's not like you guys just got these jobs. You guys have been doing this for a little while.
It doesn't seem like a lot of those guys are doing their homework. Is that what we're saying?
I don't know.
Maybe Michael Bisping isn't cracking the rule book when he goes home at night, Trying to do a little cram session on the intricacies of the rules.
It definitely doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of learning from our mistakes happening.
This is another one where I had to laugh in that right when it started, and Daniel Cormier was like, the thing that's going to make the difference in this fight is athleticism. When you see both of these guys standing as flat-footed as I have ever seen fighters standing there, just basically daring the other one to come close to him. I was just like, I don't know, DC. I don't think athleticism seems at issue here. Next question this week comes to us from Big Perm, who writes, did you guys see that during her little pity party on whatever podcast that was, Ronda Rousey also said that the UFC will basically go down the shitter once Dana is no longer running it? Girl, what? Do you think she really believes that, or is this just the shit you have to say to stay on Baldo's good side?
She might actually believe it.
They always had a close relationship.
They did. They did for a fact. I don't understand though how she thinks that happens, because the thing she said something along the lines of like, I think the title for the world's most dominant MMA organization will be up for grabs once Dana White's no longer running it. Now, as we know, the only thing that's going to bring that situation about to begin with is if he dies. He's not ever going to leave. They're not ever going to force him out.
Die.
Well, everybody will. But yeah, he's been warned by his doctor. They had a precise countdown going for a minute there until he agreed to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, now he's gonna live forever, though. So
yeah,
now he's stand corrected.
Clearly immortal. So that is a possibility. But at this point, it's such a machine that rolls on. Like, I don't understand how she thinks, like, what dominoes start to fall does she think that changes all that? Chad, a lot of times, I don't know, a lot of times, some of the times, he doesn't even go to these fights.
Many times he doesn't go. For the last several years, we've been talking about how fucking bored he seems like he is with being the UFC president.
So I don't know. I think it pretty much goes on unencumbered with, you could absolutely bring in the wrong person who could fuck some things up and at least open the door for somebody else to take a little bit of market share. But even that, they'd almost have to be trying at this point to mess things up for the UFC.
I mean, we passed over the point where losing Dana White would be a crippling blow to the UFC a pretty long time ago, honestly. Like, if you lost Dana White, would you lose some mainstream attention or perception just because, especially among casual fans, I think that they have been coached over the last 20, 25 years to expect Dana White to be out here talking and saying stuff about the fights. He is the most high-profile member of the UFC army. He is the guy that the UFC made a conscious decision to promote instead of promoting any of the fighters, again, like 2 decades ago. So he has definitely, as we all know, always been the point man for this shit. So you might lose that. You might sort of lose a public relations tool that you have been known to use to great effect. But like, in terms of the actual working of the company, as much as people talk about this guy being a visionary and the leader of the whole thing, the UFC at this point is a self-perpetuating machine. And like, I have a hard time believing that losing any one person, even Dana White, would have much effect on the day-to-day operation. Like, from everything we know about him, he probably maintains a very hands-on role, right? But like you said, he's probably not even there every day at this point, right? Mick and Sean and everybody else probably just out there doing their jobs, and Dana probably has the final say in fight cards and production issues and all this other stuff. If somebody needs to get called up and called a son of a bitch, he's the one who does it. But like, I don't know, man. It's just, he's not the head. He's not the head and brain of the giant at this point, right? Like, you could lose him and still go on.
And even at the high level negotiation standpoint, if you lost him, you'd still have like Ari Emanuel and the guys who are behind Endeavor. It's then spun off TKO. It seems like those guys are pretty instrumental when it comes time to negotiate a $7 billion TV deal or some shit like that. So The area that I think Dana White actually does deserve probably more credit than he gets, and we've talked about this before, is in TV production.
Yeah.
That he did a lot for the UFC to get the TV production, and refusing to give up control of that, knowing how it should look and feel, all that stuff. But even that is so stamped into the UFC at this point that it's just sort of a rinse and repeat approach. It's why it's always looks the same, feels the same. It runs very smoothly from a live TV and from a live event perspective, but it also, they have a ton of experience doing it right now. So it's like they don't, he set that pattern for them, did a very good job of it, but they don't need him there to continue doing that. They all know how to do it at this point. So I can't see, I can also though see how people might think, similar to Donald Trump, who Dana White is good friends with and shares a lot of personality quirks with. It does seem like if you want to stay in the good graces, you got to go out of your way to heap praise upon him, But
Yeah.
I think for Ronda, I think she might actually believe it.
Well, the UFC feels way less like a Dana White cult today than it did like 5 years ago, right? I don't even know. I'm not even on Twitter very much anymore. I don't know if you go on Twitter and say, make even the remotest, lightest, most gentle criticism of Dana White, is your timeline immediately still full of lick spittles telling you that you don't fucking know a thing and Dana's rich and therefore he must be a brilliant, great guy?
There's still plenty of those people out there. I like to think I've muted a bunch of them by now, but they're still there.
All right, I'm going to float what is maybe a controversial idea, and that is perhaps Ronda Rousey has not actually been paying that close of attention over the last handful of years, and Dana White is, as Vanderlei Silva would say, her very big friend. And maybe that's basically what this is. Like if someone was like, "Oh, what would happen to Yahoo Sports if Ben Fowlkes left?" I'd be like, "Oh, they'd be in the shitter. They might as well close that daily newsletter down if they lost Ben Fowlkes."
What do you say? I don't understand. I don't understand why you use that as an example.
It's probably not a good metaphor. I don't know. All right, last question this week comes to us from Brian Van Diggle, who writes, subject, Ben, was this your dream? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Hi, gents. Ben, I saw last week that you had 2 articles posted on Uncrowned on the same day. One was about Gervonta Davis's new domestic violence charges, and the other about Andrew Tate being named CEO of Misfits Boxing despite all his sexual assault charges. Is this what being a combat sports reporter has become? The big homies Pete Carroll basically became a courtroom reporter during Conor McGregor's sexual assault case and subsequent appeal. It's become quite difficult to be a fan of combat sports. Seems like it can be pretty unpleasant to be a journalist covering it as well. Ben, we talked about this last week. It was a great week for the assholes in combat sports in some ways last week. We'll talk about that right after this. Well, Ben, I'm going to let you answer this question, but I will just say from the jump, none of us got into this business to write about Gervonta Davis's domestic violence charges. That is not why you become a sports writer. You are not sitting around at any point thinking like, oh man, I would love to become the go-to guy for Conor McGregor's many court appearances.
Yeah.
That's not why you do it, man. That's not why we got into this thing.
No, I mean, I will say there are times, not with legal issues so much, but I've been surprised at the variety of things I've had to learn about in the course of reporting on professional fucking cage fighting over the last 20 years. Because there were times where it's like, I got to learn what the normal healthy testosterone to epitestosterone ratio of an adult man is. I got to learn what a carbon isotope ratio test is. I got to learn about antitrust law. There's like a lot of weird shit like that you end up going down these rabbit holes. And that sometimes can be kind of fun. Not in these situations. And I'll tell you what, one thing that's annoying about it, especially it was the case when I had to write that story on Gervonta Davis. It was the case when I had to write this thing on Andrew Tate. It's hard just to track down all the information you need to know how many different times they've been accused of the same shit and in how many different places. Because for neither one of them was this the first instance. So it's just like, all right, how do I make sure I keep it all straight in my head? Which of the charges are still outstanding? Which of the ones have been settled or dropped in one way or another? Was this incident where when he was captured on video grabbing a woman by her neck at the charity basketball game, was that the same one that he was later accused of, or is that a separate one? Like all kinds of shit like that, where you're just kind of going like, oh, okay, so here I am going to write this story and wondering, does this one even fucking matter? Will this just be another one that gets filed away? In this case, the Gervonta Davis one, it at least mattered in a little bit of a way,
Yeah.
because as we talked about last week on the Power Hour, we were like, will they go ahead with this fight on Netflix? It's kind of a high profile mainstream venue for a guy who is coming off yet another domestic violence allegation. And ultimately, they looked into it and decided, you know what? Nope, fuck it. That thing's off.
Yeah. Jake Paul, in fact, I was trying to call up the actual statement here. But he didn't seem happy with Gervonta Davis at this point. He says, Gervonta Davis is an actual walking human piece of garbage. Working with him is an absolute nightmare. The unprofessionalism, the bizarre requests, the showing up hours late to shoots, to the numerous arrests and related accusations and lawsuits. If you support this man, you support the most vile sin a man can commit. So,
but that's who Gervonta Davis was before.
Yeah,
this time. Like
I was just going to say, Jake Paul was okay with it a couple weeks ago, or at least he was able to put up with it.
Well, and he was willing to use it as part of the promotion for the fight. He got up there at the press conference that was mentioning this stuff and seemed like, all right, you clearly knew this about him. You clearly knew that he had these accusations and allegations in his past, and you were willing to not only overlook it, but to work with it in order to make this fight come off. And then it just happens one more time, too close to the fight, and you go, I am appalled. I cannot believe.
Appalled. I see what you did there.
And especially to be like, if you support this man, well, you were kind of supporting this man in a way, like you were going to give him money to fight you. So like that is something you were willing to do and overlook. And so that part rings a little bit hollow coming from them. Like, okay, now we're going to get up on the soapbox because it's going to be like, if anything, it seemed like there was maybe a little bit more vehemence behind he was late to shit and he didn't really put his back into the promotion, but all of which we could all see, right? Like he was never doing a good job to hold up his end, helping sell this fight. And so if anything, I had to guess Jake Paul would probably be more angry about that than he was about any of the domestic violence stuff.
But domestic violence stuff is not the first things on the list.
No, it's the last stuff on the list.
Yeah, it's not the first grievance Jake Paul airs.
And I mean, I would be interested to know how much of this, because they put out a statement where it's like MVP, the Jake Paul, promotional company is going to investigate these allegations. And like, okay, what does that mean? Well, I wonder whose decision it really was to pull the plug on this, because what we were talking about last week was, does Netflix really want to be in that kind of a business? Do they really look around and be like, okay, hey, do we get ourselves into some shit we don't want to be in with this influencer crossover boxing world? Maybe let's pull out and reevaluate. So I don't know. What does this mean for the Chris Weidman Anderson Silva boxing match, though, Chad? That's what I think the world is dying to know.
Oh God, we'll pray for a replacement for Gervonta Davis so that we don't miss out on the fight everyone had been talking about. Appalled, by the way, would be a much better name
than Impulsive.
Than Impulsive for whatever Paul Brothers podcast that one is. It was just Appalled would be much better. I liked that there was a hot minute where we were thinking about having Big Fran in this fight, and then he basically laughed in our faces, laughed in the face of whoever called him to say that he had the opportunity to fight Jake Paul. Wasn't his response something like, "Be real. Why are you wasting my time with this?"
Yeah, something like, you don't go from Gervonta Davis to Francis Ngannou. Like, that doesn't make sense. And you're like, yeah, okay. And it is also, at this point, less than 2 weeks away. So what the hell are we even talking about there? Yeah. And then, you turn around and the we also talked about this on the Power Hour last week, the Andrew Tate thing with Misfits Boxing, where I do think that this is a little bit of a miscalculation from Misfits Boxing because they have a real, hey, we're just fucking around kind of brand. And then you go and you make Andrew Tate your, I'm going to put this in air quotes, CEO. And people might start to look at you and be like, okay, but it's not fun fucking around anymore. It's kind of gross fucking around at this point. And the dude, Mams Taylor, went on Ariel's show yesterday and was basically trying to make the argument like, hey, what even is reality anymore? You know?
Well, I mean, that argument is perhaps more persuasive now than since the Dark Ages.
I mean, I guess sadly persuasive, sadly prevalent. You know, I just okay. I want to read some of his quotes here. I spoke to him. We had a very honest, genuine conversation about it. Okay, I'm sure they did. I just think almost all the charges have been dismissed. Not true. Nothing concrete has ever come out. He's fucking said that he's done this shit, basically. So there's a point where it's combat sports, first of all. Mike Tyson was on Netflix, and I don't believe Mike did the things that he was accused of, but he was
Whoa,
convicted.
whoa. Hasn't Mike even said that he did his time? I don't know. Move on.
No. But he was convicted. Andrew hasn't been convicted of anything. To me, there's so much stuff on social media, so many accusations, and so much AI, so much whatever else. My job is to provide an entertainment platform with action, with real fights. That's it. Obviously, I don't want to platform anyone I think is a truly evil person or anything like that. Don't you, though? I just don't think any of those things are true about him. So much AI. That's somebody who is just trying to undermine whether we can ever know anything. Because nobody in all of their various defenses that might be offered for Andrew Tate and his brother and all this shit they're accused of, nobody has ever said it was AI. It was a fucking deep fake. I don't think that one has ever even been offered. He's just basically being like, who can know anything about what is real and what is illusion? We are all living in fucking Plato's cave or whatever, and therefore nothing is wrong, nothing is evil, nothing is good. You know, that's a guy. The big homie Dan Brooks once said this, I believe maybe in regards to the Trump administration, where he was like, there's a difference between the liar and the bullshitter. The liar is trying to get you to believe something that is not true. The bullshitter is trying to undermine the idea of an objective, knowable reality. And that's kind of what he's sort of doing here, is just being like, hey, who even knows? Anybody could be accused of the exact same sexual assault type and human trafficking behavior in 3 different fucking countries across multiple years. Like, that's what he's doing, which is basically saying, like, I decided I want to have this guy on and nobody's going to talk me out of it.
Find me another MMA podcast that will invoke Plato's cave.
Yeah, Luke Thomas is probably out there doing some shit like that.
The allegory of the cave, ladies and gentlemen.
The point you made, though, when we talked about this last week, which I think, because it's like, he's like, hey, I put on entertaining fights. Like, he even says in this, like, that his job is to put on an entertainment platform with action, with real fights. But as you pointed out, Chad, we don't have to do any of this, because it's not like Andrew Tate is such an important person in the combat sports space that you got to deal with him. It's not like anybody was being like, as a fighter, he is to be taken very seriously, and you can't not have this guy fight because he's so important to any division or any combat sport. He's not. It's real fights. Like, there's plenty of other people with more legit, more real boxing and kickboxing experience you could put in there. You don't have to do a fight like this at all. You are absolutely choosing it. You are choosing the controversy. You are trying to leverage that for attention. Athletically, he does not fucking matter at all.
Yeah. I am going to float this idea because someone was floating it over on our Discord message board. And that is that this thing with Andrew Tate is essentially a work on the part of Misfits Boxing. And again, maybe we are getting even deeper into Plato's cave here as we begin to discuss what's real and what isn't. Who did he take over for? Was the CEO of Misfits
KSI.
KSI. So KSI also, assumedly, a figurehead CEO of Misfits Boxing, who is also, by night, a fighter. someone was either floating a report or floating the idea that this is a work, and so that if Andrew Tate, because Andrew Tate is fighting somebody, right? In
Yes.
Misfits Boss, he has a fight booked. I think the idea, or at least as it was floated to me, was that if Andrew Tate wins that fight, then they would promote a fight between Andrew Tate and KSI, and what would be at stake would be ownership of the company,
Yeah.
as though it would be some real WWE money in the bank contract on a pole match kind of shit.
Well, this quote from Mams Taylor, I guess you could say it's a work from my end because it's what's needed to happen for the business. Was KSI happy about it? Absolutely not. It's complicated because it's real, but it's something when I began speaking to Andrew, I was like, this is the way we can introduce this and make it work. In that regard, it's as real as it can be. You see, you're kind of... KSI has his equity. He's an equity partner, but I don't think he's suited for the CEO role right now. His focus is on a lot of other things. I want him to have fun with what he's doing. And if and when he gets motivated to fight again, then that's a different conversation. For Andrew, this is a perfect role. Without saying too much, KSI wasn't happy about it when he found out. This is obviously going to be a bump in the road, but I think it's going to be in the greater good of the company. So he's basically being like, yeah, no, I'm doing this for the storyline, but also no, they really are mad about it. Shit, like kind of trying to have it both ways. Also tells you something about just the nature of this business and this company in general, where he's kind of saying that in order to be CEO, you also need to be a boxer in the company. When is that a requirement?
Or at least to be CEO, boxing has to be one of your many jobs.
Yeah.
So
how would you think you could be CEO of a boxing company if you don't get in there and box at their shows? Just doesn't make sense.
All right. Well, if you have a question, comment, or concern for the podcast that you want to air for future weeks of the show, you know how to get a hold of us. Go over to co-mainevent.com, click the link in the top right-hand corner of the screen that says email the podcast. That'll get you in touch with us. Ben, is there anything else you got on your mind? Which is anything else you wanted to bring up before we sign off this week?
Actually, I was thinking that maybe what I'll do is I'll wait till we get close to the end of the year, and if I'm still in the red in our $20 we never want to see again, I had a good week, so you wait until Friday. You're going to hear all about it. I'm going to claim that I was paid to take a dive. Gambling interests came to me, and they were like, we'll give you a little money on the side if you just go down in flames. And,
what could possibly be their interest in that?
Chad, with social media and AI, and anything there's all kinds of shit going on these days, man.
This whole thing could be AI for all we know.
Who can believe anything that they see, hear, or in fact experience?
Yeah. That's a scary thought. All right, that's going to do it this week for the Co-Main Event podcast. Remember, Ben Folks and I are over on the Patreon all week, or at least our AI avatars are. Join us over there, patreon.com/co-main event. You'll like it. I can almost guarantee it. We do have fun. If we don't see you there, we'll see you right back here next week. Thanks, everybody, for the support. We appreciate you listening. As for right now, we are done. We are through. We are out. You can get some good-ass odds on the Washington Generals, though.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, plus they're big-time underdogs. So if you ever feel like tonight's their night to finally take down the Globetrotters, and get some plus money on that.
Well, then that would give the Washington Generals one thing that I don't see for PFL anywhere, which is gambling odds.
Well, that's because PFL it's pristine competition.
The smart cage is too intelligent for the gamblers. Is just like, no, we can't even get in there and mess around. It's too much advanced analytics going on.
The smart cage won't sully itself with gambling.